Hello and thanks for visiting our website, rebuilderinabox.com. Today we're going to be learning how to rebuild the ever popular Ford Starter, known as the Ford Permanent Magnet, because of the magnet housing instead of fields. This is the popular automotive style, and over here the open face is popular on the trucks and vans. These started in 1991 and continued pretty much to date. First step on tearing one apart is you'll notice where the field lead comes up and is held on by the 13mm nut. So take your 13mm socket and remove that. Then we have to get the solenoid mounting bolts off. And what we're going to do is, since we're sending you a new solenoid anyway, go ahead and tighten this up with the solenoid in the vise. Then we're going to take a 6" by 1/4" extension and pound directly down on the Torx head to break the taper loose. So go ahead and hit those pretty hard. Then if you have to put the if you have to pound the Torx head in there, go ahead and tap that in too. That'll give you a better bite. Here you can see the two Torx head bolts holding it on. And what happens is, since you tap down with that to break the taper loose, you're going to have to tap the T25 Torx into it. And that's actually a good thing. Gives you a nice strong bite, and then you're ready to crank that out. Now we're going to take the 4 bolts out in the back. The 2 that we've marked with the yellow are the 2 short ones that hold the brush holder assembly in. The bottom one is very important that you get that tight when you replace it, because the entire unit grounds out at that point. Usually these bolts, the ones that we've marked in yellow, are 6mm. These are 5/16. It varies though. Sometimes you'll see Phillips, depending if it's been rebuilt before. Usually the 2 red ones, the ones that we've marked red, are just a 5/16, and those are the long ones, the ones that go clear through and bolt to the front part of the nose. So we're going to unscrew those and then take these out. There's one of the brush holder screws and the long through bolt. And then you can take a hammer and give it just a slight tap so that the end plate comes right off. Then we're going to stand it up in the vise, because there's a little round ball in the bottom part that we'd rather not lose. Just hold the top with one hand, and you might have to tap down on it to get the nose cone off. But that comes out, and the ball is underneath this part right here. You'll see there's a concave shape, and if you look down in that hole, you'll see the ball that you don't want to lose. So what we're going to do to not lose this ball is take the gear cover off, take the 3 gears out, and then you'll see the little ball down inside this hole. Hold this kind of in with a screwdriver and just tap for it to come. And there's the shot of the 3 gears and the little ball. Then you'll notice the rubber grommet right here. Just slide that right out. Then we're going to turn it over and smack it on the bench to get the shaft assembly out. This is the shaft assembly. Take that off. The fork comes right off. And make a special note, if the fork has a rounded side on it, some of them do, some of them don't. If it does, that has to go back on with the rounded side facing the gear. So take a good look at that. Put a paint mark on it if you have to, or just write it down. The rounded portion of the fork has to go toward the gear. Now we have to remove this clip on the shaft right here so that we can get the Bendix off. All it really is just a horseshoe clip, and the way you can do that, there's two different tools you can use. You can use a pair of needle nose pliers and open them up to that size to where that each part of the needle nose is resting on the top of the clip, and then tap down on it with a hammer, or you can just take a pair of channel locks and open it up to the size of the shaft, but that they're small enough to rest on the outside of the clip. Then you hold it like that with that opening and tap straight down on it with a hammer. Then you can take the Bendix off. It just comes right off. And then you want to take sandpaper or Scotch-Brite and polish up the shaft as good as you can. If there's any ridges or burrs in the area of the undercut where the snap ring goes, take all those off with a file and then sand them off smooth. Now what we're going to do is take the armature brush holder assembly out of the magnetic housing. Put the housing in the vise just gently, and if it seems to be stuck a little bit, take your hammer handle and maybe tap it loose, because you need to work this grommet here. There's a grommet in the U shape going into the housing. You're going to have to just pry on that a little bit. Anyway, put it in the vise loosely and just push out with your fingers, and the whole thing comes out all at once. So you have the armature and the brush holder assembly. Then just pop off the brushes. The nice thing about the Ford armature, the permanent magnet Ford armature, is that visual inspection will reveal probably about 99% of the problems that you're going to encounter. We've taken some Scotch-Brite or some 80 grit paper and cleaned up the commutators on these so they can be inspected. You can see these bars here, these are all in good shape. The copper's all there in between the lines, and then you'll notice this one here, the brushes have been ignored too long on it and it's unusable. We can send you a new armature, they're not real expensive. Here's a little bit a better look at the bar that's been deteriorated, and you can see in this area here, and over here that that would be considered unusable. Whereas those are all in perfect reusable condition. The other condition that pretty much renders an armature unusable is when it's been smoked. This is caused by ignition switch sticking on, or someone had some sort of problem with their engine and they just cranked and cranked and cranked until the starter burned up. You might not be able to tell visually. Well, you can see it's burnt, but sometimes if you've had one rebuilt before, it can be disillusionable because someone painted it with some flat black or some dark black paint. But when you tear this unit down, when you first crack the end plate off, you're going to notice a large burnt smell, and once you smell that, then there's another look at the other side, and you can see where it's been burnt so badly that the varnish and everything is starting to go off of it. But once you smell that smell, the smoky burnt smell, when you tear your unit apart, you'll know right then and there that that armature is not going to be something you can reuse. And it's not something that is a slight odor. It's a very, very strong odor. Here's a shot of all the parts disassembled, just so you can double check and make sure you didn't lose anything. See the 2 screws that hold the brush holder in, 2 through bolts, gear cover, the shaft assembly, Bendix, those are normally 12 or 10 tooth, the fork. Here's a little rubber grommet, and the metal piece on the bottom of it pretty much just stays in there. Then you'll see when you take this apart originally, it only comes with the horseshoe clip and then the cover, but we provide an extra flat washer that goes on there last. We'll show you where that goes. Here's the end plate, brush holder assembly. The nose cone, the drive-in housing, still has the bushing in it, and there's a flat piece of aluminum across the top. We're going to show you how to take that bushing out of there. Armature, solenoid, and once again there's the little ball. It is possible, if you're rebuilding a Chinese unit or if the unit's been rebuilt before, that the ball won't be in there, and this shaft area right here would be a little bit longer than what you see. So if you have that situation, don't worry about the ball. Take a look at the magnets down inside the housing and inspect them all the way around for any cracks. As long as you didn't fall to the old-fashioned method of getting your car started one more time and smacking on it with a hammer, they should not be any type of damage or need any attention, other than you can clean out the area and spray some sort of either flat black paint or dry moly. Try and get as much rust out of there as you can. The magnets themselves will not rust, but the Ford Starter is very prone to rust, so you want to try and get all the rust out of there that you can, and spray paint the inside of it and the outside with some sort of rust inhibitive paint to keep the rusting down, because if rust does occur in between the housing and the magnet itself, it can push the magnet down and cause dragging on the armature. Now it's time to get the bushing out, or the needle bearing, whichever the case may be, out of the drive-in housing. First thing you do is take a center punch, put it exactly in the middle of the hole, and put a center punch. Then we recommend taking either a 1/4 inch or something smaller than a 1/2 inch drill and drilling down through. Then take a 1/2 inch drill and drill that completely out. Don't drill all the way through, just drill enough to remove the aluminum cap, which is forged in. Then we're going to take the 6 inch by 1/4 inch extension, set it down in the housing. And particularly if you have a needle bearing, you may want to apply a little bit of heat, because sometimes you have to fight with them a little bit to get them out. Make sure you got it all the way out. But the bushings come right out. We're going to be sending you 2 bushings so that you can accommodate either situation that you're in. The larger outside diameter will be the one that you want to use if you took a needle bearing out, and the smaller inside diameter will be the one that you need to use if you had a bushing. The back plate, we're really not going to worry about the bushing back in there, because very seldom does it have much wear to it, but we are very concerned with getting a good ground. So you want to take 80 grit and clean up around these holes where the brush holder goes through, because that has to mate up with those ground tabs. And it's not this one where the lead comes out, but this one is the ground for the whole unit. So the main one, you'll see the divot on this side. This hole right here, not the through bolt, but where the short screw goes in. Sand that and take some dielectric grease and smear it on there so that no future corrosion can occur. Also, clean it up very, very efficiently on the outside, and put some dielectric grease on there too as well. Okay, here's the shaft assembly. That's been cleaned up with the Scotch-Brite or the 80 grit and then some fine grit. Put the Bendix on. Then we need to put the horseshoe clip on. Get the horseshoe clip on, you just kind of set it on there, and then take a pair of channel locks and put wooden jaw on each side. Put one set of jaws up on the top and the other jaw on the bottom, and just squeeze that on there. Then we're going to put the retainer cover on. Then we're going to put the flat washer on and put a little bit of white lithium grease on it so that it stays on there. Now this is a side view of the drive-in housing. We've turned it upside down and set it in a vise, and we're going to drive the bushing in from the inside of it. What you need is a 3/8 extension. Just kind of set it in the middle so it's centered. And it goes in pretty easily, but you don't want it to fall in. If it's too sloppy, then you need to use some red Loctite or something. Okay, let's take a look at the brushes and the brush holder assembly. They come already loaded with this plastic disposable piece in there so that they're easily set on the commutator. However, these have been sprung, so just in case, we're going to show you what to do. Move this metal tab away, take the mylar top off, then you'll see the 4 springs. Take them out. Push them back, and then set the plastic piece back in. Then squeeze them together and reinsert them. I have to get all 4 of them on. Put the mylar piece back on and push the ground tab back on. Now we're ready to assemble the armature assembly. Put the armature, after it's been cleaned and inspected, lightly in the vise. Take the brush holder assembly that's loaded and push it straight down from 2 sides with both hands. Take this off, throw it away. So now we have the brushes loaded onto the armature. Take the magnet housing and put the U slot to your right and the flat slot to your left. Put it in the vise lightly. Then we're going to grasp the armature assembly, put the shaft in the palm of your hand, and squeeze it on this end so that when you put it in, it doesn't suck out of your fingers. You can also stick one finger in the hole on the left hand side and keep it from going in too fast. Then guide it in, and as you install it, you're guiding the grommet down into the U slot. And there it is. Next, we're going to insert the plastic fork back into the Bendix, remembering that the rounded portion goes down towards the gear. Just set it down in like that. As you set it down in, look in from the top and you'll see the threaded holes in the aluminum housing where the through bolts have to go through. Line either one of these up with those. The plastic gear itself, the planetary gear, is eccentric, so either this side or that side can go where the solenoid is. Put the steel ball, if you have one, down in the hole. Then put the 3 planetaries on. Then we put a generous amount of white lithium grease. For this application you can use an oil-based grease, petroleum based. Now we're going to install the gear cover, and there are 2 places, here and here, that line this gear cover up. You'll notice on the plastic outer planetary gear there are 6 little posts all together. 4 big ones and 2 little ones. The 2 smallest ones are here and here. And that's where those 2 raised up portions go. Also, you'll notice that the extrusion is going up. There's a flat side. On the other side of this, that goes down. Now we're ready to put the lid on the field case assembly, because we've already cleaned and applied a small amount of white lithium grease to the inner holes where the ground screws go. There's a line-up pin, like a notch. That goes straight up into the grommet. Then install the 2 ground screws. Tighten them up. Then put the 2 through bolts in. Then we're going to put the nose back in the vise, install the rubber grommet, and just push it straight down. Then we're just going to hold the field housing with the lead towards the solenoid. Start the 2 bolts in where the through bolts go, where the 2 holes are. Set it down on there. Get the bolts started. Tap it around gently. Sometimes you have to shake this around to get the gears to line up. And then tighten up the through bolts. Putting the solenoid on, we're going to put just a couple of little drops of oil around the edges to give it some lubrication right there. Then we have to observe the 2 copper posts. One of them is just a plain copper post. The other one, this one here, has the solder joint connected to it. That has to be the one that connects to the field lead. It won't work if you get that wrong. So we're going to put that on there. Making sure that the field lead is connected to the motor post. Put the T25 solenoid bolts back in. Now this connection right here, when you go to put this field lead on, is a source of a lot of problems, and it's a high voltage connection. So what we do is put white lithium grease underneath and a little bit of white lithium or dielectric grease on top of it, and then get that started on there and use a wrench to put that on, noticing that we do have the motor terminal on the solenoid, not the battery stud terminal hooked up to it, and tighten that down with some force. Don't use so much force that you're going to break it right out of the plastic brush holder, because it's the plastic cap, because this is just a plastic cap. But that is a really hot spot, and there's a lot of voltage going through there, and that is the source of a lot of problems. So take care of that and watch it. Also, at this point, we want to take just a moment and review that this bolt right here is nice and tight. Not so tight that it strips out, but as tight as you can get it without causing damage to any threads, because that's the ground for the whole unit. We also want to know that that was cleaned on the inside, and that there was a little bit of white lithium or dielectric grease applied so that future corrosion can't occur. Just a few things more about the solenoid connection. First of all, make sure that nothing is twisted or sticking out towards the exciter terminal, and make sure that the field lead coming up, it can touch the post, but it can't touch anything but the grommet as it goes in. You can't have it smash down and land against the side of the housing or something like that. Also, we would ask that if you're smart, you'll do a good job on installation. Take a little bit of dielectric grease and put it on both your connection points. And the wires that go on here, take a piece of sandpaper, sand them on both sides. Then take a little bit of this lithium or dielectric grease and smear it on both sides of the eyelets before you install. If you want to, you can test the starter with a set of jumper cables. Lay the starter on the ground, run the jumper cables up to your battery, red on positive, black on negative, then put your foot on the starter to hold it down. And what you're going to do to turn the starter on and off is take a pocket screwdriver and bridge the gap between the big post where the battery stud is and the little post, and that would turn it on. Now when you take it away, it should quit running, and then you go back and forth several times just doing that, bridging from the little post to the big post. And what we usually do first is we do a series of short bursts so that we can see that the Bendix is snapping in and throwing back quickly. No hang-ups. Don't get your fingers or any tools in there. Then we go ahead and do a couple of runs so you can hear it wind out and hear what the sound is. Now that we're done, put a couple drops of oil on the shaft right there, and you're ready to install. The open face version of the Ford Starter is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is the Bendix. and there's Phillips holding the solenoid on instead of the Torx. But the first thing you have to do is take this snap ring off. You'll probably need a set of either snap ring pliers, or you can use something really pointy, but it's going to be a lot easier if you have a set of snap ring pliers. Then we're going to take the gear off. Sometimes you have to take a couple screwdrivers and pry up on it to get the gear off. Then the rest of it, you basically just take it apart, take the bolts out, take the back end apart, just like the other ones. The brushes are a little bit different. We'll show you that. What it is, it's just a different style spring. You still pull the ground side out of the way and then take the mylar cover off to expose everything. But all it is just there's a post there that's a different type of spring wraps around it and maintains the pressure. These kind here, if your little plastic keeper happens to come out, what you would do is take all the springs out and then put the plastic brush holder onto the actual armature itself. Then put the brushes in, and then take a pair of needle nose pliers and put the springs in last. This style of Bendix doesn't have the regular horseshoe clip. We have to pull this down and look closely down into this area right here. You'll see the big horseshoe clip. And what you need to do is open up a set of needle nose pliers and set it on both sides of that horseshoe clip, and then tap down on the top of the needle nose pliers with a hammer. Here's a close-up of the clip. You can see it's facing up here and here. You can't even get a, sometimes you can get like a screwdriver in behind it on the other side. It comes right off. Here you can see the clip and the little slots that if you want to, you can get a screwdriver in on the other side. Now, this is some sort of a cog or something, I think you call it, to get the Bendix off. Push it down, give it a turn counterclockwise until the teeth line up, then it comes right off. Then when you put a new Bendix back on, push it down in, turn it clockwise to make sure that the teeth are going to catch and not let it come back off again. Then we're putting the snap ring back on again, and it goes flush up against the plastic. Just take a screwdriver, set it on there, and then tap the end of the screwdriver